Morro Bay, California, July 15, 1991. The morning fog hung low over Morro Bay as it had for countless summer days before, but July 15, 1991 would prove to be different from all the rest. Sarah Mitchell, a 34-year-old shell collector known throughout the coastal community for her methodical approach to marine specimen gathering, had set out for her routine dawn walk along the pristine shoreline. What began as an ordinary summer morning would evolve into one of California's most perplexing missing person cases. Sarah Mitchell was not an impulsive person. Friends and family described her as meticulous, punctual, and deeply passionate about marine biology. Every morning for the past 3 years, she had walked the same stretch of beach between Morro Rock and the harbor, armed with her collection bag, identification guides, and a detailed notebook where she recorded every significant find. Her dedication to this routine made her absence all the more alarming when she failed to return home by noon, as she had done without exception for over 1,000 consecutive days. So glad to have you here. Comment your city so I can bring cases from your region and also know where you're watching me from. The first sign that something was wrong came when her husband, Michael Mitchell, returned from his morning shift at the local marina. Sarah's car remained in their driveway, her coffee cup still warm on the kitchen counter, and her lunch prepared but untouched in the refrigerator. Michael initially assumed she had lost track of time, a common occurrence when Sarah discovered something particularly interesting during her collecting expeditions. However, as the afternoon progressed and several phone calls to her usual beach locations yielded no results, concern transformed into genuine alarm. By 3 p.m., Michael had contacted the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Department. Detective James Patterson, a seasoned investigator with 15 years of experience in coastal law enforcement, was assigned to the case. Patterson's initial assessment suggested a straightforward search and rescue operation. The California coast, while beautiful, presented numerous hazards for solitary walkers. Unstable cliff faces, sudden tide changes, and hidden crevices that could trap or injure an unwary explorer. The search began immediately. Deputy sheriffs, Coast Guard personnel, and local volunteers combed the shoreline between Cayucos and Cambria, expanding the search area well beyond Sarah's typical collecting grounds. Within hours, the search team made their first significant discovery. Approximately half a mile north of Morro Rock, scattered across a section of beach that Sarah was known to frequent, lay her distinctive canvas collecting bag, her field notebook, and several specialized tools she used for extracting specimens from tide pools. The positioning of these items immediately struck Detective Patterson as unusual. Rather than being clustered together as they would be if simply dropped or abandoned, Sarah's belongings were spread across nearly 50 yards of beach. Her notebook lay partially buried in sand, approximately 30 feet from her collecting bag, while her specialized extraction tools were found closer to the waterline. Most peculiar was the condition of the items themselves. Despite being exposed to ocean spray and wind, the notebook's pages showed minimal water damage, suggesting the items had not been there for an extended period. Patterson's investigation revealed that Sarah had been seen earlier that morning by Robert Chen, a local fisherman who regularly worked the waters near Morro Bay before dawn. Chen reported observing Sarah around 5:30 a.m., approximately 2 hours earlier than her usual arrival time. More significantly, Chen noted that Sarah appeared to be heading toward a section of beach she rarely visited, an area known for its rocky outcroppings and challenging terrain. The discovery of Sarah's scattered belongings prompted an intensification of search efforts. Helicopter crews scanned the coastline from above, while marine units searched offshore waters. Specialized rescue teams rappelled down cliff faces, investigating every cave and crevice that might conceal an injured person. Local volunteers organized into systematic search parties, covering inland areas in case Sarah had somehow wandered away from the beach. As the search progressed, Detective Patterson began interviewing individuals who knew Sarah personally and professionally. Her husband, Michael, provided a detailed account of Sarah's activities in the days leading up to her disappearance. According to Michael, Sarah had become increasingly excited about what she described as an unusual discovery she had made several weeks earlier. While she had not shared specific details, she had mentioned finding something that challenged her understanding of natural shell formation patterns. Sarah's closest friend, Jennifer Walsh, a fellow marine biology enthusiast, provided additional insight into Sarah's state of mind. Jennifer revealed that Sarah had recently begun corresponding with someone she described as a marine research specialist. These letters, which arrived weekly, seemed to energize Sarah considerably. She had mentioned planning to share her recent discoveries with this mysterious correspondent, though she had been secretive about the exact nature of their communications. The search for Sarah Mitchell continued for 2 weeks, involving hundreds of volunteers and professional rescue personnel. Despite covering hundreds of square miles of coastal terrain and offshore waters, no additional trace of Sarah was found. The scattered belongings on the beach remained the only physical evidence of what had happened that July morning. Detective Patterson's investigation expanded beyond the immediate search area. He contacted marine biology departments at nearby universities, hoping to identify Sarah's mysterious correspondent. However, this line of inquiry proved frustratingly unproductive. No research institutions in the region had any record of communication with Sarah Mitchell, and her description of the specialist provided insufficient information for identification. As summer turned to autumn, the active search for Sarah Mitchell was gradually scaled back. Detective Patterson continued working the case, but leads became increasingly scarce. The mystery of Sarah's disappearance settled over Morro Bay like the morning fog that had witnessed her final walk along the shore. Local newspapers covered the story extensively, generating numerous tips and theories from concerned citizens. Some speculated about accidents involving the dangerous coastal terrain. Others suggested that Sarah might have suffered a medical emergency while alone on the beach. A few proposed more sinister explanations, though no evidence supported theories involving criminal activity. The most troubling aspect of Sarah's disappearance was how completely she seemed to have vanished. Experienced search and rescue personnel noted that even fatal accidents typically left more substantial evidence. Bodies lost to ocean currents usually surfaced within days or weeks. Equipment and clothing generally washed ashore over time. The complete absence of any trace beyond the scattered items on the beach defied conventional explanations. As winter approached, the Sarah Mitchell case was officially reclassified as a missing person investigation rather than an active search and rescue operation. Detective Patterson filed his comprehensive report, documenting every lead pursued and every piece of evidence collected. The case remained open, but active investigation was suspended pending new developments. The community of Morro Bay struggled to accept that one of their own had simply disappeared without explanation. Sarah Mitchell's methodical nature and deep knowledge of coastal dangers made her an unlikely candidate for a simple accident. Her strong family relationships and stable personal life ruled out voluntary disappearance. Yet no alternative explanation seemed to fit the available evidence. In the months following Sarah's disappearance, her husband Michael maintained hope that new information would emerge. He continued visiting the beach where her belongings had been found, searching for any clue that might have been overlooked. Local residents reported seeing Michael walking the shoreline at dawn, retracing his wife's final known steps. The case file for Sarah Mitchell was eventually archived among dozens of other unsolved missing person cases in San Luis Obispo County. Detective Patterson retired 5 years later, but he never forgot the mysterious disappearance that had confounded his investigation. The scattered belongings on Morro Bay Beach remained the only tangible evidence of what had happened to Sarah Mitchell on that foggy July morning. Yet hidden within the case documents lay details that would prove significant decades later. Sarah's notebook, recovered from the beach, contained entries that investigators had noted but not fully understood. Her references to unusual shell formations and mysterious correspondence would eventually provide the key to unraveling one of California's most enduring mysteries. But that revelation lay more than 30 years in the future, waiting for another dedicated scientist to make a discovery that would finally shed light on Sarah Mitchell's fate. Investigation Initial Phase, July–August 1991. Detective James Patterson had investigated numerous missing person cases throughout his career, but the Sarah Mitchell disappearance presented unique challenges that would haunt him for years to come. As the active search phase concluded without success, Patterson shifted his focus to understanding Sarah's final weeks and the mysterious circumstances that had drawn her to an unfamiliar section of Morro Bay Beach on that fateful July morning. The breakthrough in understanding Sarah's state of mind came through a methodical examination of her personal belongings. While her field notebook found on the beach contained routine collecting observations, her private journal discovered at home revealed a completely different narrative. The journal entries from June and early July painted a picture of growing excitement mixed with scientific skepticism about something Sarah had encountered during her coastal explorations. According to her journal, Sarah had discovered what she initially dismissed as an unusual but natural arrangement of shells in a secluded cove approximately 3 miles north of her regular collecting area. The formation consisted of dozens of various shell species arranged in what appeared to be deliberate patterns rather than random deposits left by tidal action. Sarah's scientific training compelled her to document and study the phenomenon, but her observations challenged conventional understanding of marine behavior. The journal entries revealed Sarah's transformation from casual curiosity to obsessive investigation. She had begun visiting the formation site multiple times per week, photographing it from various angles and measuring changes in the arrangement. Her notes indicated that the shells seemed to shift position between visits, maintaining recognizable patterns while gradually evolving in configuration. Most troubling to Sarah was her growing conviction that the arrangements were too complex and purposeful to result from natural forces. Detective Patterson discovered that Sarah had photographed the shell formations extensively. However, when he examined her camera equipment, the film had been removed. Her husband Michael confirmed that Sarah typically developed her scientific photographs immediately, but no recent prints were found among her possessions. The absence of these potentially crucial photographs represented another mysterious element in an already perplexing case. The investigation took a significant turn when Patterson uncovered evidence of Sarah's correspondence with the mysterious marine research specialist mentioned by her friend Jennifer. Hidden within Sarah's personal files were copies of letters she had written to someone identified only as DM. The letters revealed that Sarah had sought expert opinion about her shell formation discovery and had arranged to share her photographs and detailed observations with this individual. Sarah's letters to DM demonstrated her evolution from scientific curiosity to genuine concern about the implications of her discovery. She described the formations as displaying characteristics that suggested intelligent arrangement rather than natural occurrence. More significantly, she expressed growing unease about the location's isolation and her increasing compulsion to visit the site, despite feeling that she was being observed during her investigations. The letters also revealed that DM had expressed considerable interest in Sarah's discovery and had requested detailed coordinates for the formation site. In her final letter, dated just 3 days before her disappearance, Sarah had agreed to meet DM at the location to conduct a joint investigation. She had mentioned feeling both excited about the professional collaboration and nervous about meeting someone she knew only through correspondence. Detective Patterson's attempts to identify DM proved frustratingly unsuccessful. The return address on the letters led to a post office box in San Francisco that had been closed shortly after Sarah's disappearance. The Postal Service had no forwarding information, and their records indicated the box had been paid for with cash. Inquiries to marine biology departments throughout California yielded no matches for researchers with those initials who might have been interested in shell formation phenomena. The investigation expanded to include Sarah's financial records and personal communications. Bank statements revealed no unusual transactions in the weeks before her disappearance. Phone records showed no long-distance calls to unknown numbers. Her routine had remained remarkably consistent until the morning she failed to return home. The absence of any dramatic changes in her life made her disappearance even more inexplicable. Patterson interviewed dozens of people who had encountered Sarah during her final weeks. Beachwalkers, fellow collectors, and local business owners all provided consistent descriptions of Sarah as focused and enthusiastic, but not displaying any signs of distress or unusual behavior. Several witnesses confirmed seeing her at the mysterious shell formation site, often alone and photographing extensively. One witness provided information that would later prove significant, though its importance was not immediately apparent. Timothy Rodriguez, a graduate student in marine biology, conducting research along the same stretch of coast, reported having brief conversations with Sarah about her discovery. According to Rodriguez, Sarah had shown him photographs of the shell formations and expressed both fascination and concern about their implications for understanding marine behavior. Rodriguez's account included details that had not emerged elsewhere in the investigation. He described Sarah as being particularly troubled by evidence that the formations appeared to incorporate shells from multiple geographic regions, some of which should not naturally occur together in California coastal waters. This observation had led Sarah to hypothesize that human intervention was involved, though she could not determine the purpose or methodology behind such activity. The search for physical evidence at the shell formation site itself proved challenging. By the time Patterson located the coordinates based on Sarah's journal entries, the site showed no trace of the elaborate arrangements she had described. The area contained typical scattered shells and marine debris consistent with normal tidal deposits. Whether the formations had been deliberately removed or naturally dispersed could not be determined. Patterson's forensic team conducted thorough analysis of the beach site where Sarah's belongings had been found. Soil samples, footprint casts, and detailed photographs documented every aspect of the scene. However, the sandy beach environment and exposure to tidal action had eliminated most potential evidence. The positioning of Sarah's scattered belongings remained the primary physical clue to what had occurred. Psychological profiling suggested that Sarah's disappearance was unlikely to be voluntary. Her strong family relationships, financial stability, and passionate involvement in her scientific interests provided no motivation for abandoning her life. Medical records indicated no history of mental health issues or conditions that might impair judgment. The profile painted a picture of a stable, intelligent woman who had encountered something unexpected during her routine scientific activities. As autumn approached, Detective Patterson compiled a comprehensive case file documenting every aspect of the investigation. The file included detailed timelines, witness statements, physical evidence catalogs, and analysis of Sarah's personal documents. Despite the thoroughness of the investigation, no clear explanation for her disappearance had emerged. The case attracted attention from missing person advocacy groups and amateur investigators. Various theories were proposed, ranging from accidental drowning despite the absence of a body, to abduction by unknown individuals connected to her shell formation discovery. None of the theories could be substantiated with available evidence. Local media coverage gradually diminished as other stories captured public attention. The Sarah Mitchell case became another unsolved mystery in the files of the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Department. Detective Patterson continued to receive occasional tips and reports of similar shell formations along the California coast, but none led to significant developments. The mystery of DM's identity remained one of the most frustrating aspects of the case. Patterson's efforts to trace the correspondence had exhausted conventional investigative approaches. The individual had successfully maintained anonymity while encouraging Sarah to visit an isolated location just days before her disappearance. Whether DM was connected to Sarah's fate or merely an unfortunate coincidence could not be determined. As 1991 drew to a close, the active investigation of Sarah Mitchell's disappearance was officially suspended. The case remained open, and Patterson continued to review the file periodically, hoping for new developments. However, the trail had grown cold, and leads had been exhausted. The impact of Sarah's disappearance extended beyond law enforcement and family. The local scientific community lost a dedicated researcher whose work on coastal ecosystems had contributed valuable data to regional environmental studies. Her methodical approach to documentation and her growing expertise in shell identification had made her a respected figure among amateur and professional marine biologists. Years passed without resolution. Detective Patterson eventually retired, but he kept copies of the Sarah Mitchell case files. The mystery had affected him profoundly, representing one of the few investigations in his career that had yielded no satisfactory conclusion. He occasionally revisited the files, searching for overlooked clues or new angles of investigation. The photographs that Sarah had taken of the mysterious shell formations remained missing, These images potentially contained the key to understanding what had drawn her to that isolated beach location and what had ultimately led to her disappearance. Without them, investigators could only speculate about the nature of her discovery and its possible connection to her fate. But sometimes the most important clues remain hidden for decades, waiting for the right person with the right expertise to recognize their significance. The answers to Sarah Mitchell's disappearance lay buried not just in the investigation files, but in the very landscape where she had made her final, fateful discovery. Morro Bay, California, June 14, 2023. The morning mist clung to the California coastline as Dr. Emily Rodriguez adjusted her field equipment along the rocky shores of Morro Bay. As a marine biologist specializing in mollusk behavior patterns for the University of California, Santa Barbara, Rodriguez had spent the better part of 2 years studying the effects of climate change on shell-bearing marine organisms. Her research focused on how shifting ocean temperatures influence the distribution and behavioral patterns of various species along the central California coast. Rodriguez had chosen this particular stretch of coastline for her study because of its unique geological features and diverse marine ecosystem. The area offered an ideal laboratory for observing how different species adapted to changing environmental conditions. Her methodical approach to data collection would have impressed Sarah Mitchell, though Rodriguez had no knowledge of the woman who had walked these same shores 32 years earlier. On this particular morning, Rodriguez was investigating reports from local residents about unusual shell accumulations that had appeared following recent storm activity. Significant weather events often revealed new geological features or redistributed marine debris in patterns that provided valuable insights into ocean current behaviors and ecosystem dynamics. What she discovered would challenge everything she understood about natural marine phenomena. The site Rodriguez investigated was located approximately 3 miles north of Morro Rock, in a secluded cove accessible only during low tide. The area matched the general description of the location where Sarah Mitchell had made her mysterious discovery decades earlier, though Rodriguez was unaware of this historical connection. As she approached the site, her trained eye immediately recognized that what lay before her defied conventional explanations. Spread across the sandy floor of the cove was an extraordinary arrangement of shells representing dozens of different species. The formation extended roughly 30 feet in diameter and appeared to follow a complex geometric pattern that resembled astronomical configurations or mathematical sequences. Individual shells were positioned with precise spacing and orientation, creating an overall design that was both aesthetically striking and scientifically baffling. Rodriguez's initial assessment focused on determining whether the formation could result from natural processes. Storm surges, unusual tidal patterns, or seismic activity sometimes created seemingly organized arrangements of marine debris. However, several factors immediately suggested that natural forces could not account for what she observed. The shells showed no signs of recent water damage or displacement, indicating they had been placed rather than deposited by wave action. More significantly, Rodriguez's identification of the individual shells revealed species from geographical regions spanning thousands of miles. California native species were interspersed with shells typically found in Hawaiian waters, Gulf of Mexico coastlines, and even some specimens that appeared to originate from Indo-Pacific regions. The presence of such diverse species in a single location was impossible to explain through normal marine distribution patterns. Rodriguez documented the formation extensively, using high-resolution photography and precise measurement techniques to record every detail. Her scientific training demanded thorough documentation before disturbing the site, though she felt compelled to collect samples for detailed laboratory analysis. As she worked, she became increasingly convinced that the arrangement represented deliberate human activity rather than natural phenomenon. The shell formation displayed characteristics that suggested significant planning and knowledge of marine biology. Different species were grouped according to taxonomic relationships, with similar families positioned in recognizable clusters. The overall pattern incorporated elements that resembled both scientific classification systems and aesthetic design principles. Whoever had created this formation possessed extensive knowledge of marine life and considerable artistic sensibility. Rodriguez's investigation revealed additional troubling aspects of the discovery. Several shells in the formation showed signs of deliberate modification, including careful drilling and polishing that indicated professional-level preparation. Some specimens had been treated with preservation chemicals that prevented natural deterioration, suggesting they had been maintained over extended periods. The level of care and expertise involved in creating and maintaining the formation implied systematic, long-term human involvement. As Rodriguez continued her documentation, she noticed subtle variations in the formation that suggested it had evolved over time. Certain sections appeared newer than others, with shells showing different degrees of weathering and exposure. This observation indicated that the formation was not a single creation, but rather an ongoing project that had been maintained and modified over months or possibly years. The discovery presented Rodriguez with a significant dilemma. Her scientific instincts demanded thorough investigation and publication of her findings. However, the clearly artificial nature of the formation suggested possible illegal activity, such as unauthorized collection of protected marine species or violation of coastal preservation regulations. She needed to determine the appropriate authorities to contact before proceeding with her research. Rodriguez's immediate concern involved the potential ecological impact of the shell formation. If the arrangement involved removal of shells from their natural habitats, it could represent a form of environmental damage that required intervention. Additionally, the presence of non-native species raised concerns about possible introduction of invasive organisms or diseases that could affect local marine ecosystems. That evening, Rodriguez contacted her research supervisor at UCSB to report her discovery and seek guidance on appropriate protocols. Her supervisor, Dr. William Thompson, listened with growing interest to her description of the shell formation. Thompson's extensive experience in marine research had exposed him to various unusual phenomena, but Rodriguez's account represented something entirely outside normal scientific understanding. Thompson advised Rodriguez to contact local authorities before proceeding with further investigation. The presence of what appeared to be illegally collected specimens from multiple international locations suggested possible violations of numerous environmental protection laws. Additionally, the systematic nature of the arrangement implied ongoing criminal activity that law enforcement should investigate. Rodriguez's call to the San Luis Obispo County Sheriff's Department was initially treated as a routine report of possible environmental violations. However, when she described the location and characteristics of her discovery, the duty officer recognized similarities to reports in older case files. The officer requested that Rodriguez remain available for further contact and promised that appropriate personnel would respond to investigate her findings. Unknown to Rodriguez, her call triggered a series of communications within the sheriff's department that would eventually resurrect one of the county's most perplexing cold cases. The location she described matched coordinates that had been significant in the Sarah Mitchell investigation 32 years earlier. The description of elaborate shell arrangements echoed details from Sarah's journal entries that had never been released to the public. Detective Sandra Walsh, a 20-year veteran of the Sheriff's Department who specialized in cold case investigations, was contacted about Rodriguez's discovery. Walsh had recently reviewed the Sarah Mitchell file as part of a systematic re-examination of unsolved cases using modern investigative techniques. The correlation between Rodriguez's find and the historical case was too significant to ignore. Walsh immediately recognized the potential breakthrough that Rodriguez's discovery represented. The shell formation provided the first physical evidence related to Sarah Mitchell's disappearance since her scattered belongings had been found on the beach in 1991. If the formation was connected to Sarah's mysterious correspondent DM, it might finally provide answers to questions that had haunted investigators for decades. The implications of connecting Rodriguez's discovery to the Sarah Mitchell case extended far beyond solving a cold case mystery. If the shell formation had been maintained continuously since 1991, it suggested that whoever was responsible remained active in the area. The person or persons involved had successfully operated undetected for over 3 decades, creating and maintaining an elaborate display that served some unknown purpose. Rodriguez spent a restless night considering the potential ramifications of her discovery. Her scientific training had prepared her for unexpected findings, but the possibility that her research had uncovered evidence related to a decades-old disappearance was beyond anything she had anticipated. The shell formation that had initially intrigued her as a marine biology puzzle now appeared to be something far more sinister. As dawn approached, Rodriguez realized that her morning walk along the Morro Bay coastline had initiated a chain of events that would challenge everything she thought she knew about scientific research and criminal investigation. The beautiful and mysterious shell formation she had discovered was about to become the center of a renewed investigation into one of California's most enduring mysteries. The answers to Sarah Mitchell's disappearance had been waiting in that secluded cove for 32 years. Arranged in plain sight for anyone with the knowledge and expertise to recognize their significance. But recognizing the formation's true meaning would require understanding not just marine biology, but the twisted psychology of someone who had used scientific knowledge for purposes that extended far beyond legitimate research. San Luis Obispo County Crime Laboratory, July 3, 2023. The sterile environment of the county crime laboratory buzzed with unusual activity as forensic specialists examined what would prove to be the most significant evidence in the Sarah Mitchell case since 1991. Dr. Emily Rodriguez's discovery had triggered a comprehensive investigation that brought together marine biology expertise, criminal forensics, and cold case investigation techniques in an unprecedented collaboration. Detective Sandra Walsh had spent the previous weeks coordinating between multiple agencies and specialists to ensure that every aspect of Rodriguez's shell formation discovery received appropriate analysis. The potential connection to the Sarah Mitchell disappearance had elevated the investigation's priority and attracted resources that would have been unavailable for a routine environmental violation case. The forensic examination of the shell formation revealed details that confirmed Rodriguez's initial assessment while uncovering additional layers of complexity that no one had anticipated. Under controlled laboratory conditions, specialists were able to conduct analyses that had been impossible in the field environment where the formation was discovered. Carbon dating analysis of selected shells from the formation provided the first concrete timeline evidence connecting the discovery to the Sarah Mitchell case. Multiple specimens showed ages consistent with collection and placement, beginning approximately 32 years earlier, with additional shells added at various intervals throughout the subsequent decades. The pattern of additions suggested systematic maintenance and expansion of the formation over time. More significantly, chemical analysis of the shells revealed preservation treatments that matched compounds available primarily to professional researchers and educational institutions. The sophistication of the preservation techniques indicated access to specialized equipment and materials not readily available to amateur collectors. This evidence suggested that whoever had created the formation possessed professional-level knowledge and resources. The geographical analysis of the shell specimens yielded the most disturbing findings. Forensic specialists identified species from over 20 different geographical regions, including several protected marine sanctuaries, where collection required specific permits and documentation. Cross-referencing with international databases revealed that many of the specimens matched shells reported stolen from research institutions and museums over the past 3 decades. Detective Walsh's investigation had expanded to include cooperation with federal agencies responsible for tracking international trafficking in protected species. The scope of the shell collection implied a sophisticated operation that had been acquiring specimens through various illegal means for decades. The formation represented not just an elaborate display, but evidence of systematic criminal activity spanning multiple jurisdictions. Photographic enhancement techniques applied to Rodriguez's documentation revealed additional details that had not been apparent during initial field observation. Computer analysis identified subtle patterns within the overall formation that resembled coded messages or coordinate systems. Specialized software used for decrypting complex patterns detected repeated sequences that suggested intentional communication rather than purely aesthetic arrangement. The breakthrough in understanding the formation's true purpose came when forensic linguistics specialists examined the arrangement patterns using techniques typically applied to encoded messages. The positioning of different shell species appeared to follow a substitution cipher, with each species type representing letters or numbers in a coded system. When properly decoded, sections of the formation revealed geographical coordinates and date sequences. The coordinates embedded in the shell formation led investigators to a location approximately 5 miles inland from the discovery site. The dates decoded from the pattern spanned from July 1991 through the present, with entries occurring at regular intervals. The most recent date sequence corresponded precisely to Rodriguez's discovery of the formation, suggesting that the creator had somehow anticipated or planned for its eventual discovery. Retired Detective James Patterson, now 78 years old, was contacted by Detective Walsh to assist with interpretation of the decoded information. Patterson's familiarity with the original Sarah Mitchell investigation provided crucial context for understanding the significance of the new evidence. His review of the decoded coordinates triggered memories of locations that had been investigated but not thoroughly explored during the original case. Patterson's involvement brought a wealth of historical knowledge about the case, but also revealed gaps in the original investigation that modern techniques could potentially address. DNA analysis capabilities available in 2023 far exceeded what had been possible in 1991, offering opportunities to extract genetic evidence from materials that had been preserved in the case files for over 3 decades. The investigation team decided to conduct a comprehensive search of the location indicated by the coordinates decoded from the shell formation. Ground-penetrating radar equipment was deployed to scan the area for any anomalies that might indicate buried objects or disturbed soil. The technology revealed several areas of interest that warranted further investigation. Environmental specialists joined the search team to ensure that any excavation activities complied with protection regulations for the sensitive coastal ecosystem. The search location was situated within protected habitat areas, requiring careful coordination with environmental agencies to minimize ecological impact while conducting the investigation. The search operation revealed evidence that transformed the Sarah Mitchell case from a missing person investigation into a confirmed homicide. Buried at the precise coordinates indicated by the shell formation, investigators discovered human remains that preliminary examination suggested had been interred for several decades. The positioning and preservation of the remains indicated careful burial rather than random disposal. Additional evidence found at the burial site included personal items that had belonged to Sarah Mitchell. Her camera equipment, missing since her disappearance, was discovered in a waterproof container along with undeveloped film that had been preserved by the controlled burial environment. The discovery of this evidence confirmed the connection between the shell formation and Sarah's fate. The undeveloped film found with Sarah's remains provided the photographs that had been missing from the original investigation. When processed using modern techniques, the images revealed the shell formation in its original configuration from 1991. The photographs documented the formation's evolution over time and provided evidence of human involvement in its creation and maintenance. Analysis of the photographs revealed additional details about the formation's creator. Several images inadvertently captured partial views of an individual working on the shell arrangement. While the images were not clear enough for facial identification, they provided information about the person's approximate age, build, and clothing that could be used for investigative purposes. The discovery of Sarah's remains and the evidence connecting her death to the shell formation triggered a massive expansion of the investigation. Federal agencies became involved due to the interstate nature of the shell trafficking operation, and international cooperation was requested to trace the origins of specimens from foreign locations. Detective Walsh coordinated the establishment of a multi-agency task force to investigate what had evolved from a missing person case into a complex criminal enterprise spanning multiple decades. The task force included expertise in homicide investigation, environmental crimes, international trafficking, and forensic archaeology. The shell formation that Dr. Rodriguez had discovered represented far more than an elaborate memorial or artistic expression. Analysis revealed it to be a sophisticated record-keeping system documenting criminal activities over 32 years. Each addition to the formation appeared to correspond to specific criminal acts, creating a timeline of illegal activities that investigators were beginning to decode. The psychological profile of the individual responsible for creating and maintaining the formation suggested a highly intelligent person with extensive scientific knowledge and a compulsive need to document their activities. The elaborate nature of the shell arrangement indicated a personality type that combined criminal behavior with artistic expression and intellectual superiority complex. As the investigation progressed, the scope of criminal activity connected to the shell formation continued to expand. Evidence suggested involvement in multiple disappearances, extensive trafficking in protected species, and possible connections to missing person cases in other coastal regions. The formation appeared to be just one component of a larger criminal enterprise that had operated undetected for decades. The breakthrough that Rodriguez's discovery represented was overshadowed by the realization that the person responsible remained at large and had demonstrated the ability to operate sophisticated criminal enterprises while maintaining a facade of legitimacy. The shell formation had served as both a trophy and a taunt, hidden in plain sight while documenting crimes that investigators were only beginning to understand. The answers to Sarah Mitchell's disappearance had been preserved in an elaborate code that took 32 years to discover and decode. But those answers revealed a criminal enterprise that extended far beyond a single victim and suggested that the investigation was far from over. Monterey Bay Marine Research Institute, August 15, 2023. The morning sun cast long shadows across the prestigious Monterey Bay Marine Research Institute as federal agents prepared to execute a search warrant that would culminate one of California's most complex criminal investigations. After weeks of painstaking analysis and cross-referencing databases spanning 3 decades, the multi-agency task force had identified their primary suspect in the Sarah Mitchell murder and the elaborate shell trafficking operation that had operated undetected for over 30 years. Dr. David Morrison, a 68-year-old marine biology professor emeritus at the Institute, had built an impeccable reputation as one of the world's leading experts in mollusk taxonomy and marine conservation. His published research had contributed significantly to understanding shell formation patterns and species distribution along the Pacific coast. Morrison's professional credentials provided the perfect cover for activities that investigators now understood had been far from legitimate scientific research. The investigation that led to Morrison's identification began with analysis of the shell specimens found in the coded formation. Forensic specialists had traced the preservation techniques to specific chemicals and methodologies that were primarily available through academic research institutions. Cross-referencing purchase records for these specialized compounds over the past 3 decades revealed a pattern of acquisitions that pointed directly to Morrison's laboratory at the Institute. Morrison's correspondence with Sarah Mitchell had been conducted under his legitimate initials, DM. But investigators discovered that he had used multiple post office boxes and mail forwarding services to obscure his identity. The sophistication of his communication security demonstrated a level of operational planning that suggested extensive experience in avoiding detection while conducting illegal activities. The search warrant execution at Morrison's laboratory and residence revealed evidence that exceeded even the task force's expectations. Hidden within his seemingly legitimate research facilities was an elaborate documentation system that recorded decades of criminal activity. Morrison had maintained detailed records of shell acquisitions, victim encounters, and burial locations with the same meticulous attention to detail that characterized his published scientific work. Morrison's personal files contained correspondence with dozens of amateur shell collectors and marine biology enthusiasts spanning multiple states and countries. The letters revealed a consistent pattern of Morrison identifying potential victims through their expressed interest in unusual shell formations or rare species. He had cultivated relationships with collectors by positioning himself as a respected expert willing to assist with identification and analysis of specimens. The investigation uncovered evidence linking Morrison to at least 7 additional disappearances of amateur collectors and researchers along the Pacific coast between 1988 and 2019. Each case shared common characteristics. The victim had been in correspondence with someone identifying themselves as a marine research specialist, had discovered or possessed unusual shell specimens, and had disappeared after arranging to meet their correspondent at isolated coastal locations. Morrison's method of operation demonstrated a chilling consistency. He would identify potential victims through their correspondence about unusual discoveries, establish his credibility through his legitimate academic credentials, and gradually encourage them to visit remote locations where he could eliminate them without witnesses. The shell formations he created served multiple purposes. They attracted the attention of serious collectors, provided a coded record of his activities, and satisfied his apparent psychological need to document and display his crimes. The physical evidence recovered from Morrison's facilities included preserved biological samples from his victims, personal items taken as trophies, and an extensive collection of rare shells that had been illegally obtained through various means. DNA analysis of the biological samples confirmed connections to several missing person cases that had previously been classified as accidental deaths or voluntary disappearances. Morrison's computer files revealed the true scope of his criminal enterprise. He had operated an international network for trafficking rare and protected marine specimens, using his academic connections to facilitate illegal exports and imports. The financial records associated with this operation showed millions of dollars in profits generated over 3 decades, funding Morrison's elaborate criminal activities while maintaining his legitimate academic career. The psychological profile that emerged from the investigation painted a picture of an individual who combined intellectual brilliance with psychopathic tendencies. Morrison appeared to derive satisfaction not only from the act of killing, but from the intellectual challenge of creating elaborate systems to document and conceal his crimes. The shell formations represented a form of artistic expression that allowed him to display his superiority while taunting law enforcement. Further investigation revealed that Morrison had been aware of Dr. Rodriguez's research activities in the Morro Bay area and had anticipated that his shell formation would eventually be discovered. Computer analysis of his files showed that he had been monitoring marine research activities along the California coast, suggesting that Rodriguez's discovery was part of a planned revelation rather than an accidental finding. The task force discovered that Morrison had prepared for the eventual exposure of his activities by establishing multiple escape routes and false identities. Financial records revealed offshore accounts and property holdings in non-extradition countries, indicating that he had been planning for the possibility of fleeing the United States if his activities were discovered. The sophistication of his preparation suggested that the revelation of his crimes might have been intentional. Morrison's arrest came not through dramatic confrontation, but through careful surveillance and coordination. Federal agents had monitored his activities for weeks while building their case, ensuring that all evidence was properly documented and that Morrison could not destroy crucial materials or escape. When agents finally moved to arrest him, Morrison offered no resistance and appeared almost relieved that his elaborate deception had finally been uncovered. The interrogation of Morrison revealed details that confirmed investigators' worst fears about the scope of his criminal activities. He admitted to killing Sarah Mitchell when she had inadvertently discovered evidence of his illegal shell trafficking operation during her exploration of the formation site. Morrison had initially intended to recruit Sarah as an unwitting accomplice, but her scientific training had led her to recognize that the shell arrangements could not be natural phenomena. Morrison's confession included details about his other victims and the methodical way he had selected and eliminated them. He described his activities with the same clinical detachment that characterized his legitimate scientific work, treating his victims as research subjects rather than human beings. The psychological evaluation of Morrison confirmed diagnoses of antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic traits that had enabled him to commit multiple murders while maintaining a successful academic career. The investigation team also uncovered evidence suggesting that Morrison had been planning additional crimes when his activities were exposed. His files contained research on new potential victims and locations along the Pacific coast, where he intended to establish additional shell formations. The discovery of his plans prevented what could have been years of additional criminal activity. The revelation of Morrison's crimes sent shockwaves through the marine biology community, where he had been respected for his contributions to scientific knowledge. Colleagues and students struggled to reconcile the image of the dedicated researcher they had known with the reality of his criminal activities. The case highlighted the potential for individuals in positions of academic authority to exploit their credentials for criminal purposes. Morrison's elaborate shell formations, which had initially appeared to be artistic expressions or scientific experiments, were revealed to be monuments to his victims and records of his criminal enterprise. Each formation contained coded information about specific crimes, creating a landscape of hidden memorials that only Morrison understood. The formations served as both trophies and insurance policies, ensuring that evidence of his activities would eventually be discovered if he were unable to continue maintaining them. The psychological evaluation of Morrison suggested that he had derived considerable satisfaction from the knowledge that his crimes were hidden in plain sight, documented in formations that appeared to be legitimate scientific phenomena. His need to document and display his activities had ultimately led to his downfall, but it had also provided closure for families who had waited decades for answers about their missing loved ones. As the investigation continued, the full scope of Morrison's criminal enterprise became apparent. He had operated with impunity for over 3 decades, using his legitimate scientific career as cover for activities that had resulted in multiple deaths and millions of dollars in illegal profits. The case represented one of the most sophisticated and long-running criminal operations ever uncovered in California, challenging assumptions about the nature of serial crime and the potential for criminals to hide within respectable institutions. The evidence against Morrison was overwhelming, but the investigation was far from complete. His network of criminal associates and the full extent of his victim list remained to be determined. The shell formations scattered along the California coast would need to be examined for additional coded information that might reveal other crimes or victims. The legacy of Morrison's activities would continue to impact investigations for years to come, as authorities worked to understand the full scope of his criminal enterprise and provide closure for the families of his victims. Monterey County Superior Court, November 20, 2023. The oak-paneled courtroom in Monterey County Superior Court bore witness to one of California's most extraordinary criminal trials, as Dr. David Morrison faced justice for crimes spanning over 3 decades. The trial of the former marine biology professor had drawn international attention, not only for the complexity of his criminal enterprise, but for the unique way his crimes had been discovered and documented through his own elaborate shell formations. Morrison sat quietly at the defendant's table, his once distinguished appearance now marked by the weight of his 78 charges, including 7 counts of first-degree murder, multiple counts of trafficking in protected species, and numerous federal charges related to his international criminal operation. The man who had once commanded respect in academic circles now faced the possibility of multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. The prosecution's case, led by District Attorney Patricia Reynolds, presented a comprehensive narrative of Morrison's criminal activities that spanned from 1988 to 2023. The evidence included DNA analysis linking Morrison to 7 victims, financial records documenting his illegal trafficking operation, and the decoded shell formations that served as Morrison's own detailed confession to his crimes. The systematic nature of his criminal enterprise and his meticulous documentation provided prosecutors with an unusually complete record of his activities. Sarah Mitchell's case formed the centerpiece of the prosecution's argument. Reynolds presented evidence showing how Morrison had lured Sarah to the isolated cove under the pretense of scientific collaboration, then murdered her when she discovered evidence of his illegal activities. The photographs recovered from Sarah's preserved camera equipment provided a timeline of events leading to her death and documented Morrison's creation of the memorial shell formation that would eventually lead to his capture. The trial revealed the full scope of Morrison's psychological manipulation of his victims. Expert testimony from criminal psychologists described Morrison's use of his academic credentials and scientific knowledge to establish trust with potential victims. His correspondence with amateur collectors and researchers demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of human psychology that he had exploited to identify and isolate vulnerable targets. Morrison's defense team, led by attorney Charles Davidson, faced the nearly impossible task of defending against overwhelming physical evidence and Morrison's own documented confessions. Davidson's strategy focused on questioning Morrison's mental competency and arguing that his elaborate documentation system demonstrated severe psychological impairment that should mitigate his responsibility for his crimes. The defense presented expert testimony suggesting that Morrison's compulsive need to document his activities indicated serious mental illness. The defense's argument was undermined by Morrison's own meticulous planning and execution of his criminal enterprise. Evidence presented during the trial demonstrated that Morrison had operated his illegal activities with careful consideration for avoiding detection while maintaining his legitimate academic career. His ability to teach, publish research, and interact normally with colleagues and students for decades contradicted claims of severe mental impairment. The prosecution's presentation of Morrison's coded shell formations captivated the courtroom and the media covering the trial. Marine biology experts testified about the sophisticated knowledge required to create and maintain the formations, while forensic specialists explained how the arrangements had been decoded to reveal information about Morrison's crimes. The formations represented a unique form of criminal evidence that challenged conventional understanding of how criminals document their activities. Victim impact statements from the families of Morrison's victims provided some of the trial's most emotional moments. Michael Mitchell, Sarah's widower, spoke about 32 years of uncertainty and grief that had finally been resolved through the discovery of Morrison's crimes. Other family members described similar experiences of loss and the relief of finally understanding what had happened to their loved ones. The international scope of Morrison's criminal enterprise became apparent through testimony from federal agents and international law enforcement officials. Morrison's shell trafficking operation had involved contacts in over 20 countries and had resulted in the illegal movement of thousands of protected specimens. The financial profits from these activities had funded Morrison's elaborate criminal operations while allowing him to maintain his prestigious academic position. Morrison's trial also exposed weaknesses in the systems designed to monitor and prevent trafficking in protected species. Testimony revealed how Morrison had exploited legitimate academic exchanges and research collaborations to facilitate illegal activities. The case prompted calls for enhanced oversight of academic research involving protected species and improved international cooperation in tracking suspicious activities. The defense's attempts to portray Morrison as a dedicated scientist whose mental illness had led him to criminal behavior were contradicted by evidence of his calculated planning and execution of his crimes. Morrison's ability to maintain normal professional relationships while simultaneously operating a complex criminal enterprise demonstrated a level of psychological compartmentalization that indicated deliberate criminal intent rather than mental impairment. During the trial's final week, Morrison surprised the court by requesting to address the judge directly. His statement, delivered with the same clinical precision that had characterized his academic work, provided additional details about his criminal activities while showing no remorse for his victims. Morrison described his murders as necessary actions to protect his research and expressed frustration that his scientific contributions would be overshadowed by his criminal conviction. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges against Morrison. The speed of their decision reflected the overwhelming nature of the evidence and the clarity of Morrison's guilt. The verdict brought closure to families who had waited decades for answers while ensuring that Morrison would spend the remainder of his life in prison. Judge Margaret Thompson sentenced Morrison to 7 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, plus additional federal sentences for his trafficking activities. The judge's sentencing statement emphasized the calculated nature of Morrison's crimes and their impact on both his direct victims and the broader scientific community. Thompson noted that Morrison's abuse of his academic position represented a particular betrayal of public trust that warranted the maximum possible punishment. The resolution of the Morrison case had broader implications beyond the conviction of a serial killer. The investigation led to enhanced protocols for monitoring academic research involving protected species and improved international cooperation in tracking suspicious activities. Dr. Rodriguez's role in discovering Morrison's crimes was recognized with awards from law enforcement agencies and conservation organizations. The shell formations that Morrison had created along the California coast were carefully documented and then removed to prevent them from serving as monuments to his crimes. The specimens were returned to their countries of origin when possible, while others were donated to legitimate research institutions. The sites where the formations had been located were restored to their natural state. The families of Morrison's victims found different ways to cope with the resolution of their decades-long uncertainty. Some established memorial foundations dedicated to supporting marine conservation research, while others worked to improve missing person investigation procedures. Sarah Mitchell's family created a scholarship fund for marine biology students, ensuring that her passion for scientific research would continue to benefit future generations. Dr. Rodriguez continued her research on climate change impacts on marine ecosystems, but her work now included studying the ecological damage caused by illegal trafficking in protected species. Her role in uncovering Morrison's crimes led to consulting opportunities with law enforcement agencies investigating environmental crimes. She remained committed to ensuring that scientific research contributed to conservation rather than exploitation of marine resources. The Morrison case became a subject of study for criminal psychology researchers and law enforcement professionals. The unique nature of his documentation system and his ability to maintain a legitimate career while conducting extensive criminal activities provided insights into the psychology of serial offenders and the potential for criminals to hide within respected institutions. Retired Detective James Patterson, whose original investigation of Sarah Mitchell's disappearance had laid the groundwork for eventually solving the case, attended Morrison's sentencing. Patterson reflected on how advances in forensic science and the dedication of a new generation of investigators had finally provided answers to questions that had haunted him for over 3 decades. The case validated his decision to preserve evidence and maintain detailed case files that proved crucial to the eventual resolution. The legacy of the Morrison case extended beyond criminal justice to impact marine biology research and conservation efforts. The case highlighted the potential for criminal exploitation of legitimate scientific activities and prompted enhanced oversight procedures designed to prevent similar crimes. Morrison's elaborate shell formations, which had served as both trophies and confessions, would be remembered as one of the most unusual forms of criminal evidence ever discovered. As the courtroom emptied following Morrison's sentencing, the families of his victims finally had the closure they had sought for decades. Sarah Mitchell's disappearance, which had begun as a simple missing person case in 1991, had ultimately exposed one of the most sophisticated criminal enterprises in California history. The truth had been buried for 32 years, hidden in plain sight among the natural beauty of the California coast, waiting for the right person with the right expertise to recognize its significance and bring a killer to justice.